Welcome to the Holy Post. Tensions have flared around the country after the fatal shooting of Renee Good by an ICE agent in Minneapolis, and the Department of Homeland Security has rolled out a new slogan as it defends the lethal action. One of ours, all of yours. Is the Trump administration declaring civil war on Americans? Then two 17th-century philosophers, Hobbes and Locke, help us understand the divide in our politics today. But Kaitlyn explains why Christians should be hesitant to embrace either of them. Then I talk with Senator Raphael Warnock, Democrat from Georgia, about his dual roles as both a senator and a pastor, and why he calls the country's economic problems a spiritual crisis. Also this week, the Bears shred the Packers. It's a new year, and that means you have a new chance to join HOLYPOST Plus. We're rolling out exclusive new content every day for HOLYPOST Plus subscribers, including shows like the Skye Pod, Getting Schooled by Kaitlyn Chess, Advice-ish, and very soon you'll be seeing some more lighthearted HOLYPOST Plus features, like Phil and I playing the Newlywed game. We also have a new book club release coming up, and of course, exclusive merchandise. Keep in mind that subscriptions to HOLYPOST Plus are the primary way that everything we do at HOLYPOST Media is funded. So, by signing up, you're not only getting access to our very best content and resources, you are also making it possible for more people to be impacted by the content we create, which is always orthodox and pro-neighbor, the very kind of content that our culture so desperately needs right now. So head over to holypost.com today to learn how you can sign up for HOLYPOST Plus. Here is episode 703.
Hey there, welcome to the Holy Post Podcast. I'm Phil Vischer. Yes, indeedy, it's me again. And I'm here with Skye Jitani. Hi, Skye.
Hi, Phil.
I don't know, I'm feeling a little loose.
A little punchy today.
Feeling a little punchy. And Kaitlyn Chess is here.
Yikes.
But now this is serious.
Now we're serious.
Because you blew us off last week.
I'm sorry.
I think we need a public reprimand.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, we didn't. I had stories, and I thought, these are perfect for Kaitlyn.
That's so touching.
And then like 5 hours before, I was like, okay, Kaitlyn's not here. What do you mean she's not here? She's away somewhere.
I had to go back to Duke.
You didn't have to. You chose to.
I did have to.
You chose to.
I had a class. I had to go.
But I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is we did not know
I'm so sorry.
advance.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the class was not spontaneous.
Just thinking, was it an emergency class?
That's right.
Like Sunday night?
Yeah.
They said,
there was some theology
Kaitlyn, stat.
astray.
Your beeper, your emergency beeper went
and
off.
I just had to run and fix it.
The Kaitlyn signal lit up in the sky.
We should get one of those, yeah.
A Kaitlyn signal?
There's a theological emergency?
Yes!
I think Noah's going to have one.
No!
Soon. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're sorry.
I'm so sorry.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It won't happen again. I'll never leave again.
No, you
It's
can
not
leave.
about the leaving. It's about the not informing.
I'll make sure that you know.
Right.
This is a tight run ship.
Yeah.
Everything
it is.
planned down to the second. And you can't just mess with my stuff. Okay. And today you were late.
I was not late. I was exactly on time.
A little bit late.
I was exactly on time. I'm planning a wedding, Phil, okay?
Really? Who's getting married?
Me.
What?
I know.
My goodness.
And it's happening faster than it feels like it should. It's just like, how is time
How
working?
fast does it feel like it should happen?
I mean, I would like to be married immediately.
Yeah,
but like,
right.
The planning
Once you
stuff
get
is
engaged,
like,
it's like, do we really have to do all this?
That's how I feel.
Yeah.
We did consider today, like, do we go to City Hall tomorrow?
Yeah.
Just be done with this whole thing?
No, but as we discussed before we started recording, you're not doing it for you, you're doing it for us.
Which honestly I believe in.
Yeah.
Like a marriage and a wedding are
It's a
communal
community-
affairs.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's my girl.
That sounds like a cult.
No, oh my gosh.
Skye.
I'm kidding.
Skye.
I get
Wait
what
until you
mean.
learn about Christianity. And now the theme song.
What's the news that you like the most? Who's your favorite podcast host? If it's breakfast, get your toast. It's Skye, Phil, Kaitlyn, and the Holy Post. Skye, Phil, Kaitlyn, and the Holy Post.
And sometimes other people.
Holy Post is sponsored by Sundays for Dogs. I got a dog, you got a dog, all God's children got dogs. When we get to heaven, gonna feed our dogs real high-quality dog food. But you don't have to wait to heaven, you can start now. with Sunday's Food for Dogs. Sunday's Food for Dogs was founded by a veterinarian and mom, Dr. Tori Waxman, who got tired of seeing so-called premium dog food full of fillers and synthetics. Sunday's is air-dried, real food made in a human-grade kitchen. Every bite of Sunday's is real meat, fruit, and veggies with no kibble, whatever that is, and just scoop and serve. Unlike other real food dog food, Sunday's doesn't have to be refrigerated. Just real food made with care for the dog you love. Make the switch to Sunday's. Go right now to sundaysfordogs.com/holypost and get 40% off your first order. Or you can use code HOLYPOST at checkout. That's 40% off your first order at sundaysfordogs.com/holypost. sundaysfordogs.com/holypost. Or use code HOLYPOST at checkout. This episode of the Holy Post is sponsored by Hiya Health. Hey, do you have kids? Do you care about their health? Of course you do. Most kids' vitamins are basically candy in disguise, filled with 2 teaspoons of sugar, unhealthy chemicals, and other gummy junk kids really shouldn't be eating. That's why Hiya was created, the pediatrician-approved, super-powered, chewable vitamin for kids. 0 sugar, 0 gummy junk, yet they taste great and are perfect for picky eaters. Hiya fills in the most common gaps in modern children's diets to provide the full body nourishment our kids need with a yummy taste they love. And we've worked out a special deal with Hiya for their best-selling children's vitamin. Receive 50% off your first order. To claim this deal, you need to go to hiyahealth.com/holypost. This deal is not available on their regular website. Go to hiyahealth.com/holypost and get your kids the full body nourishment they need to grow into healthy adults. And thanks to Hiya Health for sponsoring this episode. Hey, Skye.
Hi.
I couldn't help but notice you wearing a Chicago Bears shirt.
I think the whole country should be wearing a Chicago Bears shirt today, except in a certain state.
What's going on?
You watched it Saturday? The Bears
Yeah.
Packers wild card game was one of the most exciting games in the history of the NFL.
Well, not the first half.
Not the first half.
The first half was like, seriously?
It was
this
awful.
This is how we play?
Yeah.
Seriously? We're going down.
But what a game.
But I think they did that on purpose to make it more exciting when they then come back. It's like the Harlem Globetrotters when they would do poorly in the first half of the game and then they would come back. It was Harlem Globetrotters was staged basketball.
I saw them in a movie.
think of it like the crucifixion and resurrection.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I wasn't going to go there.
You think all is lost.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
On Friday.
Yeah.
It's
but
the end.
Sunday's coming.
But Sunday's coming.
Yeah. And Sunday
is winning a
represents
game,
the end,
a basketball game.
The last 10 minutes of the playoff game on Saturday night. Sunday morning came Saturday night.
In this case, it did.
That's fun.
My kids got my wife and I Bears stuff for Christmas, and including this quarter zip here. So I thought I would wear this today because I just want to celebrate that the Bears. I don't know what the future holds. I don't think there's any guarantee that they go further, but I'm rooting for them. And what? Why are you looking at me?
Kaitlyn?
What sport are we talking about?
What sport are we talking about? That's what Kaitlyn Shess just said, America. Just want you to know that. After the playoff game with the Chicago Bears on Saturday night, she said, what sport are we talking about?
Football.
Okay.
Football. It's football season.
Just so you know, there's only a couple weeks left in the season. We're in the playoffs.
We're in the playoffs.
Super Bowl is February 8th. After that, you don't have to.
Yeah, Bears haven't won a playoff game.
After that, I don't have to care. I currently don't
Bears
care.
haven't won a playoff game in 15 years.
And they did yesterday.
And they
Saturday
did
night.
Saturday night.
Yes.
Whoa.
And it was a crazy comeback.
I
way
saw
they
pictures
did
of
it.
David French experiencing
You
it.
saw a picture. That's as close to football as you get.
Yeah.
Is seeing pictures of
David French's face responding to what was happening. That's all I got.
Did it inspire you? David French was at the game.
No.
Yes, and he posted some things on Instagram.
Yeah, that's all I saw.
That's all you saw.
No part of that made me want to care about the game.
Okay.
That's fine.
That's cool. You don't have to.
You're welcome here
Thank
just
you.
as you are.
we don't care about
you.
your stuff either.
Great.
So,
Augustine was a punk.
Oh my gosh.
So there. Did you have something else you wanted to share about the game? Or
No,
was that it?
I think we're going to talk about some news stories. And I, as I was contemplating events of recent days, I think part of what happened with the Bears after the game, and the Bears coach in particular, illuminates where we are in American politics. So we'll get into that, I think, in a little bit.
Wow.
Yeah.
Boy, that was a teaser. That was a teaser, everyone. So stay tuned right after this break. We're not having a break. There is no break. Oh, gee, I got to turn the corner a bit. We're going to talk about what's going on in Minneapolis and America. It's one of those stories I would prefer not to cover, but we need to cover it a little bit. Killing of Renee Good in Minneapolis by the Department of Homeland Security, by ICE officers. I'm sure you know the story, and we're not going to go into the, he said, she said, this video shows, that video shows. But the fact that the Department of Homeland Security almost immediately, within hours of the incident, issued a statement that said, rioters began blocking ICE officers, and one of these violent rioters, so describing her as a violent rioter, weaponized her vehicle, attempting to run over our law enforcement officers in an attempt to kill them as an act of domestic terrorism. So that was the government statement. And it does start to feel, and then you watch the video and it's like, well,
Nothing like that.
That doesn't look like that at all. There was no violent rioting. She said, I'm not mad at you. She actually said, the video that was up close of her talking to the officer was hard to watch because it's like, this is right before she's going to get shot.
I've actually tried to avoid watching all this videos.
Yeah.
Similar to after Charlie Kirk's assassination, there were all those videos floating. I still have not seen it. And I just don't.
Yeah.
Regardless of where you are politically, regardless of what you think about this particular incident, a woman lost her life, a mother lost her life. Like we collectively as Americans our initial response should be grief.
Yeah.
This is horrible. If you want to believe that the government agent was innocent or justifiable in his actions, the appropriate response should be to grieve over this tragic loss of life and then say, let's do a thorough investigation to get to the bottom of what really happened here. And the fact that we can't trust our federal officials anyway to take that posture, either the lament over the loss of life or the accountability of those who took her life, shows where we are. And I'm sad for America on that front.
Yeah, a piece written for Religion News Service just has the headline, this is the National Catholic Reporter, has the headline, After Renee Good, are you really going to keep pretending Trump and Vance are pro-life? So this is a Catholic publication. And they single out J.D. Vance in particular, who is in his own description, a zealous Roman Catholic, who after the killing called Renee Good a, quote, deranged leftist, as though she were a member of some other less worthy species, without any sign that his Catholic faith found her killing in the least way to be problematic. So, Catholic voices are saying, hey, there's so many Catholics in this administration, and here's some of the things they're saying about other people, which go completely against Catholic teaching.
Yeah. And, okay, this is a hard transition, but I want to go back to the Bears.
Okay.
I know this is going to seem really awkward, but one of the things that caught me...
awkward.
I know, but bear with me. No pun intended. The part that caught me is when Kristi Noem, who's the Secretary of Homeland Security, was making her statement with her big cowboy hat. And she's standing in front of a podium that has the DHS logo on it.
Yeah.
You remember what it was printed on the podium?
No.
It said, one of ours, all of yours.
What?
It's a statement now for DHS. One of ours, all of yours.
What does it mean?
It means if you kill one of ours, we will kill all of yours.
Really?
Yes.
That's our government talking to us?
That's our government talking right now. And that's what caught my attention.
And the podium was draped in camouflage netting as if she was in...
Yeah, pull up the picture.
In Iraq.
So here's what's interesting to me. I mean, that's a kind of grotesque statement anywhere. But there it is. You see it?
Oh, wow.
DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, is not the Department of Defense. It's not the CIA. It's not engaging overseas against foreign enemies of the United States. DHS is Immigration, Border Patrol, it's FEMA, it's TSA at the airport. This is an internal domestic jurisdiction department. So when you say one of ours, all of yours, who is that directed toward? I think the only way
no idea.
I think the only way to interpret it is it's directed at other Americans.
If it's the Department of Homeland.
Right. It's not the Department of Defense saying if you kill an American, we're going to kill you guys. It's if you kill one of ours, who's ours, number one. I think the only proper interpretation of this is she and the department and the administration are saying if you kill somebody who's loyal to our side, we're going to kill everyone who's loyal to your side. It's basically a declaration of civil war, that they're ready to go after fellow Americans who they think are the enemy. Okay, why does this relate to the Bears? One of the things that made Saturday so exciting for Chicagoans and Bears fans is because the rivalry with the Packers is the oldest rivalry in football, National Football League, goes back to the 1920s.
4 years.
Something like that. And Ben Johnson, the coach of the Bears, has really, since the time he was hired, really inflated this rivalry. And after the game, in this amazing comeback win, he kind of slighted Matt LaFleur, the coach of the Packers. He cursory shook his hand, but didn't do the pleasantries you normally would do.
Right. In
the locker room, he goes on this rant saying, F the Packers. And the Bears end up posting this on their social media. And it's just this kind of war cry, rally excitement around sports. He has said other kind of mean things about the Packers. Bears fans are now wearing these cheese shredder hats. Cheese grater hats, which is funny. It's great. And
it is funny.
And Caleb Williams, after the game, takes a cheese grater and he's grating cheese. And all of that has ingratiated Ben Johnson to Chicago Bears fans. They love the fact that he seems to hate the Packers as much as Bears fans hate the Packers.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous and it's over the top, but it builds this tribalism and this rivalry and this, hatred of the other side. And on one level, I'm going, that's kind of okay and appropriate in the realm of sports.
Yeah.
But what you see happening with Ben Johnson and Bears fans and the way they're stirring one another up, the coach gets the fans stirred up, they get the coach stirred up, it turns into this bloodlust kind of anger at the Packers. That's what's happened to our politics.
Yeah.
And it feels like there are people, especially on the MAGA side of things right now, who view fellow Americans the way Bears fans view the Packers, with dehumanizing rhetoric and an awful vision, and to the point where you can see a woman in an SUV who is not intending any harm as a lethal threat to you, and you're justified in taking lethal action against her because it's that team. They're the ones against us. One of ours, all of yours.
Yeah.
This is the rhetoric that's coming not from a football coach, but from the president of the United States. And one last thing on this front. I think one of the reasons Ben Johnson, the Bears coach, kind of keeps ramping up the rhetoric against the Packers is because he gets positive reinforcement for it.
Right.
From the Chicago media, from the Bears fans. I think it's exactly what happened to Donald Trump, is he started saying negative things about his political enemies, about Democrats, about progressives, whatever. And his fans loved him so much for it that he picked up on that and he keeps ramping up the rhetoric.
Yeah.
And now others in his government are ramping up that rhetoric. And this does not lead anywhere good. And it's disheartening that you have even signs now being posted where they literally are putting Civil War rhetoric on government signs against fellow Americans. And it scares me where this is leading.
Yeah. Najiba Saeed, who is executive director of the Interfaith Institute at Augsburg University in Minneapolis. My father-in-law played baseball and basketball at Augsburg back in the day. Headline in Religion News Service, neighborliness is a lived theology in Minnesota. So I've been curious about how people of faith are reacting to this and how they're applying their faith to the situation. She writes, the lived theology of neighborliness, something uniquely Minnesotan. I don't know if we want to agree with that. There's only neighborliness in Minnesota, but there is a lot of neighborliness in Minnesota. I have lived there at times. I will acknowledge that. That presses us to show up for each other. I do not need to know you to love you and show compassion. Knowing you are my neighbor is enough. Then she quotes the late sociologist Robert Bellah, who she says gives us a directive for charting a course as a nation. He wrote, "A chance for another course, another role for America in the world depends ultimately on the reform of our own culture. A culture of unfettered individualism combined with absolute world power is an explosive mixture. A few religious voices have been raised to say so. The question of the hour is whether our fellow citizens, much less our leaders, are ready to hear such voices." So there are voices standing up saying this is problematic. The unfettered individualism, sometimes unconstrained by morality, combined with the amount of power we have as a people. Minnesota has the highest number of refugees per capita in the U.S. Did you know that? No, but that's something new. This hospitality is based on theologies of welcoming the stranger, enacted by Christian and other religious relief services dedicated to resettling refugees who flee violence and persecution. And I remember, during was it the last campaign? Trump was speaking at a rally in Minneapolis and was looking out at a sea of white Minnesotans and said, "You people have good genes." And then in that same talk went on to say, "You're really having trouble with immigrants here. The immigrant community is a big problem for you guys." There's 80,000 Somalian refugees and immigrants that live in the Twin Cities. And I mean, you bump into them all over the place. There's kind of ever present in the Minneapolis area. But I don't know anyone, my brother lives there, my in-laws live there. I know lots of people that live there. I don't know anyone who's ever had a problem with one of their Somalian neighbors. But from the get-go, to get votes, he was saying, you're the good people, good genes, you look right, you're the right people to be here. Those people are troublemakers. And that has escalated to Somalians are garbage. It's got because of the criminal activity of some. We paint with a very large brush when it's an out-group that we do not like. When people that look like me are criminally active, that's on them. I had nothing to do with that. But if one of your guys did it, that's on all of you. We love collectivism to apply to others, but never to ourselves. We see this time and time again with leaders coming together to bear witness to the human rights abuses against immigrants who are, at their core, our neighbors. Examples abound of projects across the Twin Cities of people organizing to provide food for neighborhood children, offering accompaniment to immigration court, and standing witness as people are detained. At an interfaith meeting about a month ago at a church convened by a pastor and an imam concerning anti-Somali rhetoric, a rabbi said to our group, "I'm here because what is happening to your community happened to me in the past, and my Jewish teachings pressed me to be here." So she is very encouraged by the interfaith efforts of pastors, imams, rabbis coming together to say, this is a value. We value our neighbors, we love our neighbors, and we're all objecting to how they're being treated currently. And it seems to be. I mean, there were protests in Chicago. There were church meetings in Evanston with people showing up to protest the killing of Renee Good. So it seems there's a little flavor of a George Floyd moment. She's not the first person killed by ICE. A Latino man was shot and killed by ICE in Chicago. That didn't get as much press. But a white suburban mom, that's gonna get people's hackles up. And it's sad that that's what it takes, but people seem to be roused by it. Kaitlyn, thoughts?
I keep thinking while you were talking about going back to the National Catholic Reporter article, which people should read because it is kind of striking to have all of this reporting about this particular incident interspersed with quotes that are just like these very broad, positive statements about the dignity and value of all human beings from some of the political leaders that are now not upholding that principle. And while you're talking, I just keep thinking about how what we need is stories that help us love our neighbors well, because even for many people who believe this very broad principle, like there's a quote from J.D. Vance about the Imago Dei, or there's a quote from President Trump about like all humans have, value and every human life is a gift to the world. Like, I think even though this kind of hypocrisy is really stark and horrifying, most of us know what it's like either personally in our families, in our communities, in our churches, to know people, even ourselves, who believe in that principle very broadly, but when it comes to particulars, don't live it out, in part because that broad principle cannot stand up to a really powerful story that you have a part to play in. So you could have a really broad principle of, I believe in the image of God in all people and the value and dignity of all people. That principle, apart from a story, will crumple when someone tells you a very powerful story about, as you've said, Phil, the them that are coming against us, that, threaten our way of life, and even reading this article was so striking. Like, if you were only getting your media from these sources that are describing this incident in this way, you would believe it. Like, you'd be like, oh, this person was doing something awful, and it might be regrettable that she died, but
you're right. But it's
in
on
this
her.
context,
The
it's
blood
very
is on
understandable,
her,
right?
She, Franklin Graham tweeted that the lesson from all of this is obey police.
Yeah.
If they
But
direct
this
you to do
happens
something.
every time there's a police shooting or some government official who uses lethal force against someone who's seen as progressive. It's always that response. They had it coming. It's Romans 13. It's the authority of the government. You shouldn't have been there, blah, 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 blah. Or they had a criminal record or there's some excuse given for why that life mattered less. Mm-hmm. And it's just stunning to me that
But
George Floyd mattered less because he was a drug addict.
Right.
But this is why in so many of our conversations in the past, I've been so concerned. I mean, we all have, but I've been so concerned with anytime someone politically is just ratcheting up the stakes higher and higher, even if there's some truth to it, like even if there are real risks involved, there's real material effects, especially on vulnerable people. I always have this unease anytime the stakes are getting ratcheted up and people are being incited to be afraid of what's happening, just because I know how slippery that is. Like, once you've made people afraid, their principle of all humans are made in the image of God and valuable crumples against, this is how bad the problem is, this is how high the stakes are, this is what is threatened. It seems insane for most of us to think I could ever get to a place where I was saying some of the things people are saying of like, well, under these circumstances, when this much is at stake, or, when the conflict is so intense, like, it's sad, but that's what happens. But that is the way you end up reasoning when you have been pumped full of fear and anxiety and you have felt yourself pitted against who really are your neighbors, but it's them versus us. And it doesn't ever start with, oh, this person's death was justified. But that's where it ends when you have been pumped through with that fear. And you've believed really strongly a story about the world where the lines are divided and the way they're divided in most of the stories that are told about this.
We heard some of this after Charlie Kirk's killing.
Yeah.
Where people were like, well, he said some awful things and terrible things, and this is what happens when you did it. It's like, no, he did not deserve to die, period. And if we just had that consistent ethic, and I think you're right, Kaitlyn, it isn't just about holding to a principle, it's about telling a different story. And we have allowed the wrong voices to be telling the story of America lately, and it's spinning us out of control.
Speaking of wrong voices to be telling the story of America and the world, so we're running Venezuela. Did you know that? We're in charge of Venezuela. Donald Trump, in fact, he just stated that he is the acting president of Venezuela right now. He said that yesterday, I believe.
Wow.
Can he build some of his ballrooms and arches over there now?
That would be a great idea.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that you can run a country without having any physical presence we don't have anyone there. It's just he's running it through tweet. It's pretty amazing. I'm running another country.
It's amazing what they'll let you do when you're a celebrity, Phil.
By tweet. Stephen Miller was asked about this and also about Greenland, because we want Greenland again. And Denmark is growing extremely concerned at our desire for Greenland, which belongs to them. Miller claims the right to seize Greenland from Denmark if we so choose, at any means necessary. He says, and this is his description of the world, which is like, let's get down to brass tacks. Okay, Stephen Miller is some people describe him as Donald Trump's brain.
Which is scary.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
We live in a world, in the real world, that is governed by strength, that is governed by force, that is governed by power. These are the iron laws of the world since the beginning of time.
It's Nietzsche.
Yeah.
Yeah. So writing in The Atlantic, Gal Beckerman writes, it's an article entitled "What Stephen Miller Gets Wrong About Human Nature," and he takes it. I immediately thought of Nietzsche and the quest for power, the thirst for power that drives all human.
The will to power.
The will to power.
Yeah.
Which, for the record, Nietzsche thought was a good thing.
Yeah.
He did not say, "Oh, we must overcome this with self-sacrifice." No, and
he hated Christianity.
Yeah.
And that's why he hated Christianity, because the symbol of Christianity was a man giving up power, was giving up his life, and that lets the weak thrive at the expense of the uber,
which is some of the philosophical underpinnings of the Third Reich, the Nazis, all that. So,
et cetera, et cetera.
This is what's
no big deal. Gal relates it to Hobbes and Locke instead of.
I love that cartoon.
Hobbes and Locke, yeah, they were fantastic. And this is the Hobbes that Hobbes was named after.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Calvin and Hobbes.
Chaos.
This was the Hobbes, and Calvin is the Calvin that Calvin was named after. John Locke or Thomas Hobbes? That's been a question we've been asking for years. Locke, whose ideas were central, these are both 17th century philosophers, by the way, and also a stuffed tiger in a cartoon. Locke, whose ideas were central to the birth of modern democracy, thought that people were capable of reason and moral judgment. Hobbes, on the other hand, believed that we were vicious creatures who needed to be protected from ourselves by a powerful king. When a leader is Lockean or Hobbesian, whether a leader is Lockean or Hobbesian really does set the table for the kind of government they want. Barack Obama was a Lockean through and through. He thought that if citizens were just given accurate information in a fair hearing, they would converge on something like the common good. Then came Donald Trump, Hobbesian extraordinaire, who's often portrayed life under anyone's leadership but his own, as Hobbes described the state of nature: solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Comments this week from Stephen Miller might have been Hobbes, but then he says he disputes that he really understood Hobbes because Hobbes didn't think this was a good thing. And he thought that the world was like this, that the world, basically it's just the will for power and the law of the jungle.
Right.
And Hobbes' point, he says, or this author says, was, Hobbes' point was we need a very strong monarch to make life work for people.
The sovereign.
Yeah, a sovereign to apply, to control our animal instincts.
You need a teacher in the room or a parent in the room to keep all the kids in line.
Yes, and he also said that this sovereign needed to rule with the consent of the people, that we weren't just looking at a dictatorial overlord, but someone who had consent of the people. Hobbes said that stability could only come through the empowerment of a strong monarch who would have a monopoly on violence and keep our worst instincts at bay. This is not democracy, obviously, but the king, as Hobbes dreamed him up, would need to keep and gain the consent of those he ruled over. So he was trying to avoid, get us out of a horror show that resembled The Lord of the Flies, boys on an island without grown-ups or any of their rules.
There you go.
Yeah, as for Miller's vision, though, it isn't trying to make our lives better. It's horror all the way down. He's not looking to solve for this state of nature. He simply calls it the real world, one whose anarchic rules America just needs to accept and use for its benefit. So his conclusion is, if Miller has read Hobbes, he's drawn the wrong conclusions. If he was trying to channel Hobbes, this would be a break with a very old American tradition of wariness about the philosopher. The founding fathers were not fans of Hobbes. A Lockean, Jefferson, had a more expansive view of human needs and capabilities. He felt that the principle of Hobbes was lacking because it didn't take into account that humans have a moral sense. People want more than just a life without fear, Jefferson said. Every human mind feels pleasure in doing good to another.
Most human minds.
I
would not say every
might
There's
be.
some very broken human brains that do not. They're called sociopaths.
But the vast majority of humans enjoy seeing their children flourish.
Right.
And usually enjoy helping their neighbors.
Well, and this is what worries me about some of the people leading the Trump administration. I'm not sure they have normal human brains.
Okay, well, you can present your case for that in a Skye Pod episode.
I think when you look at some of the rhetoric and behavior of Stephen Miller, he does not exhibit those tendencies.
There's no empathy there.
There's no empathy. And even what he said here about it's just, power, strength, brutality. This is not how most people think.
It is incredible how corrupted the human mind can be.
Right.
Yeah. So it seems, I'm just wondering at what point do the majority of Christians recognize how unchristian this has become?
Well, this takes us back to the Bears.
Oh my goodness.
No, I'm serious. I think when you become so loyal to a tribe, to a group, to a team, you throw judgment and discernment out the window, and it's just hatred of the other and loyalty to your side. And I think some people are so loyal to the Republican Party, so loyal to Donald Trump, so loyal to the conservative movement, which is now the MAGA movement. They don't look at this stuff with a discerning, godly framework. It's just our team versus their team. It's us or them, and one of ours, all of yours, and that's it.
How many explainer videos would we have to make before it does? We can do. Oh, that face.
About the Bears?
No, not about the Bears. About what's going on.
I'm not talking about the Bears. I'm talking about tribal identity, trumping reason.
Yeah,
right.
but just using the quotes of the administration, holding them up against.
But they've got to be right, and the
Christian
threat
teaching.
must be that bad that this is justified. The threat of Denmark against our sovereignty.
That's not the argument.
I know.
It's China and Russia are going to take it, so we got to take it first.
Can I talk about Hobbes and Locke, please?
Help, yes. Tell us. Tell us. Do you know anything about political theology?
I do.
Oh, I love this.
I do feel like I must just caveat that like the description of Hobbes and Locke in this article
is a little loose,
simplified, and not totally correct.
Okay.
But
help us out.
Well, these aren't dissertations.
But one fun fact that I think shows why knowing actually what Hobbes and Locke say is important to this: the idea that a lot of the founding fathers were more Lockean is somewhat true, but for much more complicated reasons than them having a higher view of how humans can work together.
Good.
No, they
One
didn't.
of Locke's like central ideas, his justification for the concept of private property involved like if God gives everything to everyone, how does anyone own anything? And his answer is you cultivate something, and by cultivating it, you own it. And his argument for the colonization of the Americas was those indigenous people have not done what you're supposed to do and cultivate the land.
Oh, wow.
So the founding fathers had other reasons for enjoying his philosophy. I just want to put that out there.
Sure.
But I did like this article in that it seemed to me like such a perfect framing for, I know I'm biased, but like for a Christian to come in and say, there is an alternative to both of these ways of thinking about human nature. Like a Hobbesian view that puts so much emphasis on the kind of creational, like the very beginning of human life is just conflict and scarcity, and it's brutish and nasty and short. And a Lockean view that does have a very, like it similarly has this picture of his philosophy that begins with a picture of human life at the beginning that is idyllic. And it's only really when humans start like competing with each other for the same resources that there causes conflict, and then you have to have some kind of government. Both of those pictures don't fully capture what most of us actually experience when it comes to what human nature in a fallen, Christians would say, world looks like. To Skye's point, it's like on one hand we listen to this and we go, oh my goodness, humans are capable of so much more and better than this description of human life. But then the second you say that, you immediately want to follow it up with, but I can think of so many examples of how much worse we can do than Locke's view here of our capabilities and our moral goodness. And it feels like such a picture of actually to have a full idea of what humans are both capable of in a positive sense and in a negative sense, to have a really accurate view, like a realistic view of how we should engage with each other politically, requires both a real recognition of our fallenness. Like it mentions Obama, one of the critiques of others in his administration, actually more than him, was the idea, and this is a pretty common problem on the more liberal progressive end, is this idea that people actually don't disagree with me. They're just confused. And if I gave them enough facts and details, they would eventually agree with me. That view that humans are just good and rational, and if we talk everything out, we'll all come to the same conclusions, doesn't fit our experience of human life.
It's another way of saying it, to use Paul's words, I know the good I ought to do, but I don't do it.
And it's confounding and it's frustrating and like that is how human life is, and we hurt each other without trying.
Is it accurate to say that's Lockean, to think that you give people the right information?
No, not totally. But there's a strand of theology, a strand of philosophy that comes out of him that does go pretty hard in the direction, and it has shaped a lot of American political thought, pretty hard in the direction of, we're rational creatures and we work things out, and at the end of the day, we're basically good. And all of that doesn't hold up to human history.
And yet there's also massive amounts of secular research that shows even when people are given all the data and facts, they still make irrational decisions.
We're not perfectly rational and we're not perfectly good in all of our motivations.
But that's just because of social media, right?
But
it wasn't before social media.
I think it's earlier than that. But then the Hobbesian problem of, this is where I think Christians we miss the beauty of our own story, because we can fall into a Hobbesian mentality of it's all horrors all the way down. Like we have such a high view of sin that even in our political theology, a lot of Christian political theology has focused so much on sin to the point of saying, yeah, you do, whether it's you need a sovereign or whether it's democracy is the best we can do or whatever, but it all starts with sin. We think about politics, we think about human communities starting with sin.
Right.
And
total depravity, baby.
Genesis
We're good
3.
Calvinists.
I love total depravity, and I am a good
get
Calvinist.
Me some total depravity.
But Calvin and me agree that
My mom always warned me about women who like total depravity. This is not a good thing, Kaitlyn.
before Genesis 3 comes Genesis 1. And this is what Hobbes misses, is like and many Christians have missed throughout our history, is that there is a real good to our political life to acknowledge the fallenness that shapes all of our political life, but to never forget that the beginning of the story is not conflict and scarcity and violence, but abundance and goodness and true flourishing and relationship. And it seems like that shouldn't matter because that's not our experience now. But even this description of Hobbes versus Locke tells us that if you put all of your emphasis on one or the other of those truths, it'll be disastrous. Like it'll cause really poor ways of engaging with your neighbor. It will cause bad politics. Christians have this unique opportunity to say, we believe humans created good in God's image and created for something more than just doing the best we can with this violent, chaotic world. We were born and made for something good and full and flourishing. We don't experience that yet, but we await the day that we do. And in the meantime, we take seriously the reality of sin. But to this article's point about Stephen Miller, we don't give ourselves over to that. We don't just go, because we're living under these conditions, we play by the world's rules and we just kind of use as much power as we can and steamroll over whoever we need to, because we know that the beginning and the end of the story is not that story of conflict and scarcity. We can, with a recognition of the sinfulness now, live and act in a different way.
You hold the two things together.
Yeah.
And this, I've recommended it numerous times, but Tracy McKenzie's great book on the founding generation called We the Fallen People gets into how many of America's founders held that tension of human depravity and human imago Dei together and tried to craft a government structure that acknowledged the reality of both, and how at various times in our history we drift towards one or the other.
But it's letting other people take advantage of us. And that's,
is it though?
That's the worst. Other people are taking advantage of our generosity. So we have to.
This is why.
How is a nation supposed to behave? Because I do have people push.
Whoa.
Yeah, I do have people push back and say, the nation isn't supposed to act like Jesus. The church is supposed to act like Jesus. The nation is supposed to look out for our interests. As a nation, we should be looking out for...
we are the nation.
As a nation, we should be looking out for our own interests. As a church,
people.
We should be generous and benevolent. But I don't want a generous and benevolent nation.
They are right that there is a difference, obviously. Like, a nation is not a regenerate creature the way a human being can be.
Yeah.
And most of Christian theology throughout history has recognized that the authority of the church and the authority of civil powers are different. For example, there's a long history of thought about just war theory, of a way for a nation to recognize that there might be instances where you need to use physical force for some greater good. Not that. No, Skye, wrong. No. But it is important that throughout history there has been a recognition of the difference between both the power that can be wielded by these two different authorities, but also the way that the church always is pointing towards a reality, an eschatological reality beyond what's happening now, and a recognition that civil authorities are dealing with these provisional goods on earth. They are not like this. The nation is not supposed to point us towards an eternal good, but there is an overlap. This is very Augustinian. There's an overlap between the goods that the church and civil authorities are interested in. And so there's places where we find common ground and work together on things, but the church should never lose sight of pointing towards something beyond itself. But the state should also not usurp the church in trying to point beyond itself. Like, it is supposed to deal with the matters of here and now, but it's constrained by the goods that God has given in creation that put limits on the way that we can achieve
Should
those
I,
goods.
here, let me boil it down to this.
Okay.
Should I be generous as a Christian, but selfish as an American?
No. You're the same person.
The other way around?
No.
Well, this is a little bit like what Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount. You've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemies. And he says, no. You
Yeah.
love your enemies too. Like
Yeah.
your character, which is to be a reflection of God's character, be holy as your heavenly Father is holy, is to be consistent in all areas of your life. So you can't say, I love you as a Christian and I hate you as an American, because you can't bifurcate your identity and character that way.
And I think it's important. I want to go back to what Skye said about one of ours, all of yours.
Not the Bears?
No, I'm never going back to that.
Okay.
That is a good description of like a nation could, under both Christian theological reasons and secular reasons, go to war against another country. But the church historically has given as like a gift to the wider world limits on what is an appropriate way of dealing with the fact that sometimes you really do need to use violence under certain circumstances to defend the vulnerable, if you need to defend yourself. And under those circumstances, I'm not saying that a just war has ever actually happened, because humans are fallen and fail to meet those standards. But under that kind of tradition of thinking about what the state is able to do, there was a recognition that the state is not pointing beyond itself to this greater good. And yet there are limits on how it can act. One of ours, all of yours, being a denial of that because it responds to the made in God's imageness of other people incorrectly.
So it seems like we're kind of in the worst of all possible scenarios, where we have a state that is unrestrained by Christian ethics, but is using Christian language to baptize.
Yes. And some people, unfortunately, are not thoughtful enough to recognize the difference. They just see the Christian language and veneer and go, oh, it must be Christian.
Yeah.
Not recognizing that what it's actually saying and doing is antithetical to the way of Jesus.
What do we do? What do we do? No, don't just shake your head. You need to give me an answer.
Well, you mentioned all the protests that are happening, Phil, and the responses, and there's a place for that, and I'm grateful for those who are using their constitutional rights to organize, to assemble, to free speech, all of that. God bless you. I'm not sure it really moves the needle until you get more people within Donald Trump's own party, particularly those who are elected officials within his own party, to say enough is enough.
Yeah.
Like, you are violating the Constitution, you're violating ethics, you're violating the rights of your fellow citizens. This must stop. Or you're violating our treaties with our allies by trying to take their land from them.
You're considering, it was alleged over the weekend that Donald Trump asked the Department of War to draw up invasion plans for Greenland, and the general was quoted saying it's like dealing with a 5-year-old. So we need to write more letters?
Yeah, there is a constitutional remedy for precisely this kind of problem.
Yeah, I know, but they don't want to do it.
So
we need to speak up. Speak up. Speak up. And also, yes.
Well, there are,
more.
Many people near where we live are doing very small, everyday, seemingly unimportant, but actually deeply important ways of caring for their neighbors who are afraid because of ICE presence, like walking their kids to school or to the school bus, or making sure they can go to church, or bringing them groceries if they don't want to leave the house. Like, that seems small in the grand scheme of things, but it is really important, both to actually care for the material needs of people who are afraid and hurting, but also, as we said before, to just have access to and tell a different story about what's happening. Not just a story of, hey, Fox News is not telling you the whole story of what's going on with ICE, but also a story that you could share with other people that gives flesh and bones to the principle of, I believe in the image of God in all human beings. So that's a very different thing to preach that in a sermon than to invite people to care for a family that you can actually meet and know and has needs.
Right.
And that's a story that you carry with you outside of service to a particular family. It's a story you carry with you when you vote, or when you have conversations with people who disagree with you politically, or when you are writing a letter to an elected official or involved in a protest. But it's a different thing to have actually witnessed that up close and have a different story to tell.
Right. So one way to get involved is to just go to worldrelief.org. And they've got a whole page of things you can do to help out, and we like them. So go check it out, see what you can do to help. I had 2 other stories, and they were just perfect for Kaitlyn. She proposed one of them, and I was going to do them last week, but then she disappeared into the night. Disappeared into the night. We had to send out secret agents to look for her.
Like a thief.
Like a thief in the night. She was taken.
Gosh.
I was so worried that I was left behind. So maybe next week we'll get to those.
Yep.
If you're going to be here.
I'll be here.
I will be here next week.
Well,
Okay.
actually, none of us will be here next week, but
No, we're going to be here.
Yeah. We
Okay.
have to be. It's a holiday, but we don't have another day to do it, so we need to do it. Thanks, everybody. Go to Holy Post. Check out all the other stuff we're doing, and sign up for Holy Post Plus, where you get a lot of teaching content from these two and Esau McCauley as well. Good stuff. Thanks for your support, and carry on. Keep the faith. Carry a whistle. Stand up for what's right, and we'll see you next week.
One of the repeated themes of this show is it's complicated. Rather than two-dimensional binary thinking and social media sound bites, we try to take the issues of the day and make them three-dimensional and nuanced. A lot of things are just more complicated than we've been led to believe. But you know what's not complicated? AG1. And that's why it's a health routine that you, like me, are more likely to maintain. Just 20 seconds, 1 scoop, 8 ounces of water, done. Drink it first thing before your tea or coffee, before you've even checked your phone. It will become a micro habit that anchors everything else. And now's a great time to try it because AG1 has unrolled their next-gen formula with more vitamins and minerals than ever, clinically proven to fill common nutrient gaps. And AG1 now comes in multiple flavors: original, citrus, berry, and tropical. They're all delicious, but I like tropical the best. AG1 has over 50,000 verified 5-star reviews and comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee. Go to drinkag1.com/holypost to get their very best offer. You'll get a free AG1 flavor sampler and AGZ sampler to try all the flavors, plus free vitamin D3 plus K2 and AG1 welcome kit with your first AG1 subscription offer. That's drinkag1.com/holypost. drinkag1.com/holypost. And thanks to AG1 for sponsoring this episode.
The Holy Post is sponsored by BetterHelp. This year, Lisa and I will celebrate 36 years of marriage. I'd love to say it's been blissfully easy all the way, but I'd be lying. Making relationships work over the long haul is hard. I've benefited hugely from time spent with a trained therapist talking things through. Finding a good therapist who shared our faith convictions has been a huge help, and that's what BetterHelp can do for you. BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served more than 5 million people around the world. It's easy, too. Describe what you're looking for, and BetterHelp will match you with a therapist. You can join a session with the click of a button to help fit therapy into your busy life, and you can switch therapists at any time. What are you waiting for? Become a healthier you by visiting betterhelp.com/holypost to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/holypost. And thanks to BetterHelp for sponsoring this episode. This episode is sponsored by Glorify, the #1 Christian Daily Devotional App. It's a new year, a new leaf. Would you like to spend more time in the Bible in 2026? The Glorify app can help. With daily Bible readings and devotionals, plus guided meditations you can use anytime, the Glorify app is a great way to engage God's Word in 2026. Glorify's 21-day challenge is the easiest place to start. 1 devotional a day, 1 moment of quiet, 1 step toward a daily rhythm that can improve your spiritual health. Listeners to the show can get full access to Glorify for just $29.99 for the entire year. That's Glorify's lowest price ever when you download the Glorify app now at glorify-app.com/holypost. Feel closer to God this year with Glorify. Get full access all year for just $29.99 at glorify-app.com/holypost. That's glorify-app.com/holypost.
In today's interview, I refer to Senator Raphael Warnock as a unicorn because he is, of course, a Democratic senator from Georgia, but he's also the senior pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, the same church once led by MLK. And despite juggling both of those responsibilities, Senator Warnock still preaches almost every Sunday at Ebenezer. We recorded this conversation before the ICE shooting in Minneapolis, which is why the interview focuses more on economic issues, especially the affordability crisis, which Senator Warnock calls a spiritual crisis. I also ask him about the intersection of faith and politics, how he navigates those commitments, and why the Democratic Party seems to struggle so much with religious voters. Here is my conversation with Senator Raphael Warnock. Senator Warnock, welcome to the Holy Post.
Great to be with you.
All right, I want to begin with, it's always hard preparing for these kind of interviews with political leaders because it seems like events happen so quickly. By the time I'm sitting down with somebody, there's a million things going on in the world. By the time this airs, who knows what else could be happening. So I want to go to something which is not going to go away anytime soon, and that's the affordability crisis. Last month, you gave an address at the Center for American Progress where you said that rising prices and inflation were a spiritual crisis. That isn't the kind of language we typically hear from our political leaders or economic leaders on this question. Explain why you frame these things as a spiritual crisis.
Again, great to be here with you. Listen, I am not a senator who used to be a pastor. I'm a pastor who has the privilege of representing the people of my state in the Senate. And from the time I began to run for the Senate, I have framed and I've been very forthright in explaining that I see these issues in a moral frame. And so the ability to take care of yourself, the ability to live, the conditions that allow for human thriving are indeed moral issues. They are the very same issues that Jesus centered in his very first sermon when he, reading from the book of Isaiah and standing in that grand prophetic tradition, said that I came to preach good news to the poor, to open the eyes of the blind, to set the captives free, to preach the year of the Lord's freedom. And so for me, public policy ought always to center the concerns of ordinary people, particularly the most marginalized members of the human family. These are the folks that Jesus centered. And it is a part of that grand prophetic tradition. And so as we're seeing increasingly Americans unable to create the life that you would desire for your children, even after working harder and harder and seeing less and less for the work that you're seeing. And as we see wealth literally moving from the bottom to the top, we passed a bill. I say we, but I didn't vote for it. It was a bill that passed last summer. They called it the Big Beautiful Bill. Well, it's the largest transfer of wealth from the bottom to the top in American history. I don't know what's so beautiful about Robin Hood in reverse, about socialism for the rich, taking from the poor, the working class, and giving it to the wealthiest Americans. By the way, it was also a huge transfer, the largest transfer of wealth from the young to the old. I fight for our seniors as well. I have an 87-year-old mother, but any nation is transferring wealth from the young to the old and from the poor to the rich. And we're seeing the average age where people can buy a house, their first home, go up to 40. We're moving in the wrong direction. And for me, that's not just a public policy issue. It's a moral issue and a spiritual issue, which gets to how we think about each other and how we're treating one another in this moment.
I'm a former pastor as well. And so when I think about these things, I recognize there are multiple dimensions to it. It's not just about legislation or bills. There is a community aspect to it. There's a social aspect, moral aspect, as you said, spiritual aspect. Let me ask you this, though, putting your pastor hat on for a minute and maybe not your senator hat. If we are in a spiritual crisis in this country, one form of it being manifested in these economic policies, are we expecting too much from Washington to fix this crisis? Or what aspects of the problems facing America do you think are beyond Washington's ability to fix that as a pastor, you think about differently that maybe is beyond the reach of politics?
Well, look, the folks in this building where I'm sitting right now, the United States Capitol, can't fix all the problems. The church can't fix all the problems. But I think we have to be careful that we not talk about government, particularly in a democracy, as some third entity outside of ourselves. Our democracy is the high and noble expression of the covenant that we have with one another as an American people. And I would say as human beings. It is the means through which we organize love, organize compassion. And those things have to be done together. And so there has been over the decades this sort of continuous attack on Washington, and I get it. And I'm going to tread carefully here because I happen to be a member of a body whose popularity rating is literally below root canals. and in many ways, sadly, Congress has earned that characterization. But there has been this war of folks waging that some folks have waged against Washington and some, against politics, against government.
Mm-hmm.
And government is perceived as some entity outside of ourselves. Our whole country is based on the idea of self-government. And so there's a way in which I think there are folks who, even as they wage war against something they call government, they've been doing that as a path to power. And when they get in power, we're seeing things like what we're seeing, literally rewarding the wealthiest of the wealthy. Every time we get ready to do something, I can tell you in this body, whether we're talking about access to a good quality education or prescription drugs or health care, moneyed corporate interests have an outsized influence in our politics. And the voices of the people are squeezed out in that process. And that's why I say that's a moral issue, because I think that there's a way in which democracy, imperfect, all human systems are, but democracy is, for me, the political enactment of a spiritual ideal. This notion that each of us has human dignity. We ought to have a voice, which means we ought to have a vote in the direction of our country and our destiny within it. And so I'm focused on the project of building a more perfect union and of giving everybody a voice in our democracy. Let me give you just one clear example, and I'll stop. I don't mean to filibuster here as a member of the Senate. But when we were passing a law that I'm very proud of, when we capped the cost of prescription drugs here in this body a couple of years ago, early in my days here, and then part of it, we capped the cost of insulin, mm-hmm. which was my bill, $35. I was proud of that work, but as a new member of the Senate, relatively new, I was struck by the fact that we had to do all of this work. First of all, we had to pass a law to enable Medicare to be able to negotiate the cost of prescription drugs with the big pharma companies that were selling us something. It was illegal for them to negotiate in a so-called capitalist society. And then after we did all that, we only did it for 10 drugs. And that worked, and we did it a couple of years ago. And that only starts this year. That shows you the outsized impact of big pharma, big oil and gas, big gun lobbies, big corporate interests that make it difficult for us to achieve even the things we agree on the right and the left. I think it leaves people frustrated. And that's part of the spiritual crisis that I'll describe.
I think that's a great example and a good explanation for why Donald Trump was elected twice. There were a lot of Americans who believed his rhetoric around draining the swamp and the system's broken and everyone's corrupt, and they saw him as an outsider who could come in and fix it. Now, a case can be made, a very strong case, and I know you and many of your colleagues are making it, that he's made it worse, right? That he is not fixing the cost and inflation problems that we're facing as a country. And many of your colleagues on the Democratic side of the aisle are really beating this drum that you are going to be the party, if put back into power in the midterm elections and maybe even in 2028, you will be the ones that are going to fix this crisis. Why should Americans believe that when the Biden and Harris administration had 4 years to deal with this problem, and many people feel they didn't do a sufficient job with it? And you yourself are admitting that, look, the Senate's overrun by a lot of special interests and corporate lobbying and powers that are skewing these legislative bills in their direction. Is there an out to this? Because a lot of Americans, I think, look at both parties going, it's all corrupt and broken. How do you restore faith in a system like this?
Yeah, I think the effort to convince people that everybody up there is corrupt, and nobody, I think that's part of the game that's being played on the American people. And so, I would look at your viewers and I would say, I know these are dark times, and I know it's hard, but we cannot allow ourselves to be given over to cynicism, because when that happens, the muscles that allow you to respond to the issues of the moment begin to atrophy. I think that there are those who are trying to convince us that everybody's corrupt. They're trying to weaponize despair by flooding the zone with a whole range of issues every single day. Something's being thrown at us, and you don't know which ball to respond to. I think that's part of the game. But I'm not asking people to just believe us. I'm asking them to hold us accountable. They ought to hold Donald Trump accountable. Right now, he's trying to hold Joe Biden accountable after being in office for a whole year. This is not Joe Biden's accountable. Whatever you want to say about what they didn't do or whatever, he's in the White House. They have the House. They have the Senate. They're responsible for what's happening right now. So I don't expect people to let us off the hook when we're in power. I don't expect people to let Donald Trump off the hook. Whatever you think about his policies, whether you're on the right or the left, you can't keep saying Joe Biden, or whomever you want to name. If you stand up and raise your hand and say, I want to be president of the United States, the buck stops right there. As one great American president said.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit. You are something of a unicorn because you are, of course, a sitting senator. And as you mentioned, you are an active pastor in the pulpit many Sundays out of the year. You're pastoring Ebenezer Baptist. What's that?
I preach every Sunday.
Yeah, I want to get into that in a minute. But let's talk about kind of the intersection of faith and politics a little bit.
Sure.
A lot of polls are showing that your party has a growing, what pollsters call a God gap. Non-religious Americans tend to vote far more for Democrats. More religious Americans vote more for Republicans. That's been the case for a long time. But in recent elections, it's getting wider. And perhaps the most interesting aspect in recent survey data is showing that more Black and Latino voters of faith are going towards the Republican Party than they had in the past. How do you explain that? What is the hypothesis as to why your party is struggling more with religious voters, including religious voters of color, than they used to?
Well, I have to start by saying I'm sitting here as the senator from Georgia. And my election is the result of a broad coalition of people of faith, of all races, who saw my story and my commitment, some of whom didn't agree with me on everything, but I think they saw my heart. That's what I'd like to think. And we were able to win in Georgia. Listen, I think it is lamentable when people in my party, many of whom I happen to know are people of faith, are a bit reticent when it comes to talking explicitly about faith. I think part of that is driven by, a kind of sensibility that we believe in the separation of church and state. I believe in it deeply. Even as a pastor sitting in the Senate, I want to be really clear that the protection of the separation of church and state in its earliest iteration and in its most fundamental concern is about as much or more about protecting the church from the state as the other way around.
Right.
So my faith guides my work, but not in terms of doctrine, not in terms of dogma. I don't want to live in a theocracy of any kind, Christian, Jewish, or Islamic, or anybody. I like the covenant that we have with it as an American people, that we are a democracy, we are a diverse society that creates an umbrella and a space for people of various faith traditions. People claim no faith tradition at all. And so that's what guides my work. And as you point out, we are living in this interesting dichotomy where I think the people who are actually carrying out what I see as the agenda that Jesus lays out in Luke 4:18, good news to the poor, opening the eyes of the blind. Matthew 25, I was hungry and you fed me. I was sick, I was in prison, you visited me. I was a stranger, an immigrant, and you welcomed me. I think we are living in this interesting parallel universe where the folks who might be doing a better job with embodying that in some way, not in a perfect way, right, are quiet about their faith. And the folks who are talking about faith all the time, in my view, are embracing a public policy that I find very difficult to square with Matthew 25. I don't see how you claim to be a Matthew 25 Christian and at the same time literally cut 20 million Americans off of their health care while giving the rich a tax cut.
I agree with you. I think what I'm trying to get at, though, is why do you think, I know there are a lot of people in your party who are people of faith and are motivated by their faith in their pursuit of various policies, but why don't the Democratic Party and its leaders talk more about that? Because I think there's an impression in many parts of this country that Democrats don't have faith. They don't believe in God. You're an exception, clearly, because you're a pastor in the pulpit every week. But most of the people associated with your party and its party leadership are like allergic to this kind of language. They don't want to cite Matthew 25. They're not talking about Luke 4. They're not talking about, and I think back to 2006, then Senator Obama gave an amazing talk where he talked about the need for the Democratic Party to recapture the rhetoric of religion and the moral compass of religion in its policies and in its advocacy. And here we are 20 years later, and I don't think it's happened. So, and I'm worried that if only one side is seen as quote unquote religious, it actually ends up tainting America's view of what religious activism really looks like.
Yeah, as people are listening to the loudest Christian voices in our country, they're often the meanest voices.
So why doesn't your party use that more? What is preventing more of them?
I think it's a deep problem, and it's part of what I'm trying to address as I've been speaking recently and more explicitly about the spiritual crisis. I think that is part of the spiritual crisis, is this reticence on my side to talk about matters of faith. But there are exceptions, and there's certain. I'm not the only one who's doing it. There's some other voices out there, Christian and Jewish, that I can think of offhand, who live in their faith and who talk about it. I don't expect them to talk about it the way I do. I'm a pastor after all. So this is who I am. It's what I do. I don't think we should be shy when it comes to talking about this. I also do think, in fairness to folks, I do think also that when you think about the loudest voices of the Christian faith in our country, sometimes that voice has been so mean-spirited. Sometimes it's been so dogmatic, which is not appropriate for the public square, that I think people have a hard time figuring out how to thread that needle, and so they just cede the space altogether. I think it's a mistake.
Yeah, I agree. It is. I think in accordance with the First Amendment, I think the best solution to bad speech is really good speech. And we need more of it. When I first was in Washington, D.C. many years ago doing some reporting, this is back during the Bush years and then the Obama years, I met political leaders on Capitol Hill who were rooted in their faith from both sides of the aisle. And I would hear stories about Bible studies on Capitol Hill with both elected officials and staffers across the aisle, friendships across the aisle that were rooted in a shared faith. You've talked about your faith being a bridge, not a weapon. Is that still happening in today's Washington, D.C.? Are there relationships, friendships, connections across the aisle that are rooted in faith, or is that a bygone era?
No, there are genuine friendships across the aisle, and you don't always see it in part because, look, in the places where we actually get along and their friendships and agreement, I don't know that sells a lot of newspapers. There's a way in which all of our politics, increasingly our politics is being siloed.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just congressional districts that are being gerrymandered. The ways in which Americans receive their information is gerrymandered. Most people read what comes down on their feed, and the things that come down on their feed are based on who their friends are. So there's this way in which there's this reinforcement and people live in a kind of mirror where they continue seeing reflections of themselves and not enough of other perspectives and other views. And so so even in the places where we do connect, I don't know that gets reported that much. The Bible studies still go on with Democrats and Republicans. There was one this morning, in fact, led by the chaplain, Barry Black. I didn't quite make it this morning, but those things are still happening. And look, I've had colleagues of mine on the other side of the aisle, ask me to pray for them, and I've been glad to pray with them in difficult moments.
Let's shift from politics to the church entirely now. Dr. Charlie Dates is a friend of mine. He's here in Chicago. He leads Progressive Baptist Church, Salem Baptist Church. He's been on the show many times. In a recent conversation that we had, he said this is his quote. He said, "This is the first generation of African Americans that are fighting for social progress apart from the church. Many activists are not tethered to a local church at all. And the terrible indictment is that some of them seem to be making more progress than the black pulpit." I'm just curious, from your position in Atlanta at your church, do you agree with Dr. Dates' assessment of where the black church is today in activism compared to where it was a generation ago, or do you see it differently?
I think that the struggle for justice and civil rights and human rights coming out of the black church and the black community has always been probably more complicated than the story we tell ourselves. We're coming up close to Dr. King's birthday. And, we tend to tell a pretty straightforward, simple story about that. And about what there was segregation. Dr. King had a dream, and then it all went away. Right. We all know it's more complicated. And Dr. Dates, by the way, whom I know, he knows it's more complicated than that.
Yeah.
But this issue, I mentioned the civil rights movement because I actually think that these cleavages, these fissures between the pulpit and the streets, between the younger generation and the more established leaders, you see elements of that in the civil rights movement. SNCC, which was led by the Stokely Carmichaels of the world. SNCC was not SCLC, led by Martin Luther King Jr. and a bunch of preachers. And there were tensions. I think some of it was generational. Mm-hmm. Some of it had to do with certain sensibilities around church and faith, and and some of it was ideological. So we've always seen this. And, as a lifelong activist myself, I've been that student out there protesting and raising the issues alongside older leaders and pushing them about their tactics and the way that they've been doing. We've always had that. That's always been a loud conversation in our community. And I can tell you now, as the old head, if you will, as the pastor now over 50, who's a senator and a pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, led by Dr. King, I appreciate it when young people push us and challenge us and challenge our street cred. I think that's part of what you're hearing is that, you guys show up, but, sometimes pastors show up at these flashpoints, and as young people are going to push you and say, well, where were you? Have you been here all along? Have you been pushing these issues all along? We saw it, in the wake of Ferguson more than 10 years ago. There were a group of young people on the ground who were addressing those issues. And then some of the young, older establishment figures showed up. And in some ways they welcomed them, in some ways they didn't. In some ways, they embraced them. In some ways, they challenged them. I think that's an ongoing conversation and a healthy one.
Given your I joked earlier, your unicorn role as being both a senator and a pastor, what are we at 5 years almost? Your anniversary of your initial.
Yeah, I got elected on January 5th, 2021. So 5 years ago.
Yeah, it was a memorable time. It was a memorable time.
Yeah.
I'm curious, just because you do wear both of those hats, what surprised you when you came into this role? What did you not anticipate about juggling, continuing to be a pastor at Ebenezer and being a senator from Georgia? What has that been like for you? What did you not anticipate about the challenges of carrying both of those responsibilities?
Well, it's a lot, and it's literally two big jobs that I have. But what enables me to do it really is the sense in which, for me, it's all one project. I've got two big jobs, but it's one project: human dignity, and centering ordinary people and bearing witness to God's love and God's justice in the world. And so it might not surprise you, that being here a few days during the week gives me a lot of preaching material. I thought I understood sin and arrogance and hubris and power. This is a good laboratory, and I'd like to think that it's given my preaching even more depth and clarity. And then I go on Sunday morning, and being in that space gives me the fuel I need to return to this space. So it's a running train and conversation, two sides of the same coin, and I'm deeply honored to be preaching to my constituents on Sunday morning, and in a way, pastoring the 11 million people of Georgia, not by trying to convince everybody that my faith has to be their faith, but by bearing witness to God's love and justice.
Have you ever felt times where your role in one capacity conflicts with your role in the other? I mean, I think some people assume that being a pastor, being a preacher in the pulpit is sort of a prophetic role of, thus saith the Lord, conviction. And being a politician, being a senator is about compromise and flexibility and not, sticking to your guns on everything, but having to wager different things. They seem like two different skill sets. Have you ever felt that conflict where your pastoral prophetic side was in tension with your political instincts?
I'll answer your question with a question. Have you ever been to a church meeting?
Yeah, well, that's totally fair. I think people don't realize, again, having been a pastor, there's more politics involved than most people realize.
If you can manage the politics of a Baptist deacons meeting, you're well prepared for this job.
Good answer. Before we wrap up, last thing I want to ask you about, I assume you've been preaching about Christmas and Advent, given the season we've just been through. What are your plans to preach on in the coming months or weeks at Ebenezer in the new year?
Yeah, I actually began on New Year's Eve a new series of sermons. I tend to preach in series on the parables of Jesus. And so I intend, I won't get through them all. Depending on how you count the parables, they're between 30 and 40 parables. But up until Lent, I'm going to preach a select 7 or 8 of the parables. The thing I like about the parables is that they challenge our conventional worldview. Mm-hmm. They take what's common sense, and Jesus has a way of turning it upside down. Like who is this father whose son has left him and gone and wasted all of his money on harlots and wild living? He comes back, and on the way back, it's the father who, despite his dignity and superior role, if you will, it's the father who's running down the road to receive his wayward son. Jesus has a way of shocking us and challenging our worldview, and I look forward to exploring that over the next few weeks at Ebenezer Church.
Amen. Well, I pray that he blesses you with conviction and power as you preach those stories, and that it transforms people's vision of God and their role in loving their neighbor. Senator Warnock, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it, and hope to have you back on the Holy Post sometime in the future.
I'd love it.
Hey, everybody, like and subscribe so we can make more videos like this and more people can find them.